Prepare for a journey. A journey not through time, but into the minds of ancient peoples, where the line between the sacred and the terrifying was blurred. Imagine a world where human life was worth less than a good harvest, or where a leader's promise was more binding when sealed not with words, but with the very blood of innocence. Today, we will uncover the most shocking and mysterious rituals of peoples who lived on the fringes of what we know as civilization. A deep dive into practices that will make you question the limits of belief and human survival. One of the most impactful rituals for these ancient peoples was what they called the blood oath, a pact that could not be broken. Unlike our contracts today, which are merely signed papers, for them, a solemn promise required the union of one's spirit and life. In obscure ceremonies, the participants, often leaders of rival clans or two warriors seeking to seal an eternal friendship, made small cuts in the palms of their hands or arms. Then, the wounds were joined, and blood flowed from one person to the other, symbolizing the mingling of their souls and destinies. In some terrifying accounts, the trust and commitment were so deep that the covenant makers would drink a sip of each other's blood, believing it bound them irreversibly and ensuring that not even death could sever their bond. The community, watching from afar and in almost sacred silence, knew that this agreement was beyond betrayal or harm, for breaking the pact meant defying not only the other party, but also the ancestral spirits themselves and the darkest forces of nature. It was a powerful display of alliance and power, sealing destinies and shaping the future of many generations. Another chilling practice was the seed ritual, where life was exchanged for the promise of abundance. It was believed that for the earth to be bountiful and the harvests to ensure the tribe's survival, the soil needed to be nourished in a very specific and terrifying way. Shortly before planting, a strong young warrior, or in some stories, a beautiful young virgin, was chosen and taken to the field where the seeds would be sown. Under the supervision of the elders and with the people watching in a silence mingled with faith and dread, the sacrifice was made to return the life force to the earth, often with the blood and body being integrated into the newly prepared soil. The deep belief was that this human seed, charged with vital energy, would awaken the fury and power of the earth, ensuring unimaginable abundance for all. The community, despite the mourning and the imposed sacrifice, accepted this act as a necessary evil for the continuation of its existence, an extreme test of devotion to the gods of the harvest and the earth. If the following harvest was abundant and bountiful, the ritual was seen as an absolute success, confirming the power of the elders and the wisdom of the ancient and brutal beliefs. The initiation of young warriors was a test of pain and courage that makes us question the limits of human endurance. In many of these cultures, the transition from childhood to adulthood and recognition as a warrior was not an easy process. It was a brutal ordeal meant to temper both body and soul. Young men were subjected to long periods of fasting, isolation in remote places, and even rituals where they were whipped, tortured with thorns, or had their skin cut in frightening patterns to permanently mark their bodies. In some even more intense rites, they might be tied up alone in a dark forest, with wild animals prowling, having to face their deepest fears and the very real risk of death. The ultimate goal was clear, to show that they could endure any kind of suffering, transforming them into fearless fighters, capable of facing death without hesitation. The rest of the tribe, especially the women and children, watched the process from afar with a mixture of pride and anxiety, knowing that if these young men survived and passed the trials, they would be ready to protect their people. It was a brutal rite of passage, but one that created the fiercest, most loyal, and most ruthless warriors the ancient world had ever seen. For these peoples, war was not simply a clash of strength, but an event filled with symbolism and disturbing rituals. Before setting out to battle, chiefs consulted omens in chilling ways, seeking to learn the gods will regarding the outcome of the battle. Captured people, often enemies from rival tribes, could be used as vehicles for these revelations. Accounts suggest they were decapitated, and their still warm entrails examined in detail to predict victory or defeat. But the horror didn't end there. After a battle was won, the bodies of fallen enemies were not simply discarded. Their heads were often preserved, cleaned, and displayed as macabre trophies to intimidate other clans and celebrate the glory of victory. In even more savage rituals, some of these cultures believed that consuming body parts of the enemy's most valiant warriors, such as the heart or liver, in a macabre feast would bestow upon the victor the strength, courage, and power of the defeated adversary. The people watched these scenes with fear and reverence, interpreting them as a brutal warning to their enemies and a visible guarantee of their own tribe's divine power over the defeated, instilling a story of horror and respect in their enemies. Funeral sacrifices also reveal a dark and shocking side of these people's belief in the afterlife. The death of a powerful leader, a legendary warrior, or a member of high status in the tribe was not the end, but the beginning of a journey to the spirit world. And to ensure that the deceased had everything they needed in the afterlife and maintained their status, members of their court, slaves, and even loyal wives or companions could be invited, indeed forced, to accompany them. This meant they were ritually sacrificed and buried alongside the main body in burial chambers richly adorned with treasures and provisions. The purpose of this practice was to ensure that the deceased had their servants and comforts available in the afterlife, keeping their lineage of power intact and safe from misfortune in their new plane of existence. The community accepted this brutal practice as part of the natural order of things, a show of respect for the deceased and a guarantee of their spiritual path to the afterlife, even if the looks of fear and submission from those present betrayed the true nature of the mourning for lives lost that were not that of the primary leader. In times of great decisions, calamities, or epidemics, answers and salvation were desperately sought in the spirits, and the most direct channel for this communication was the oracle's fury. To access the invisible world and obtain divine revelations, the offerings could reach terrifying proportions. Young women, often virgins and considered pure, were taken to secret caves or temples, enveloped in dense smoke and the hypnotic chants of the priests. There, to open the door to the other side, these oracles could be subjected to terrifying and extreme experiences, or their blood was shed as a form of payment for the divine revelation. The people, their hearts aching with anxiety and with no other alternative, had to trust completely in the words of the priests and even more so in the suffering of the oracle, for the future of the entire tribe depended on these frightening predictions. A good omen meant relief and prosperity, but a bad sign often required even more horrendous sacrifices or led to drastic decisions that changed the course of the tribe's history. The impact of these sessions was total, functioning as the sole compass guiding the lives and choices of the entire group. The belief in blood purification reveals how extreme the understanding of impurity and disease could be. For these people, filth and sin were not just physical things that could be removed with water. They were spiritual evils that clung to the soul and could spread like plagues, bringing sickness and misfortune to the entire community. To cleanse these evils and ward off misfortune, something more powerful than water was needed: blood. In some of the most shocking practices, an animal was sacrificed, but occasionally, a person considered impure or spiritually sick by the tribe was used in this brutal ritual. The blood, after being ritually shed, was sprinkled over the community or applied directly to the sick individual. It was believed that blood, as the very essence of life, possessed the magical power to purify, expel evil spirits, cure invisible illnesses, and restore order. The people's reaction was a mixture of dread and hope, seeing this bloodshed as the only way to avoid even greater misfortune, such as famine, plague, or defeat in war. It was a ritual that united the community in a dark belief that the bloodshed was a remedy for ills they couldn't see, demonstrating the lengths they were willing to go to survive and remain clean from the terrifying forces they couldn't control. Now, you might be thinking these stories come from a completely different world, right? But if you stop and think about it, are we really that far removed in some of our impulses? Today, of course, we don't sacrifice people or drink blood to close a deal. But reflect on the limits of pain athletes go through in the name of overcoming obstacles, or the symbolic power of a handshake worth millions, a vow of silence between friends, or even how some superstitions still guide important decisions in our lives, even if we don't admit it out loud. The way we express ourselves has changed drastically, yes, but the search for control, security, victory over adversity, and a deeper meaning to life remains exactly the same. We still cling to symbols, to modern rituals, even though they seem much more civilized, that give us a sense of belonging, power, or faith in something greater. Deep down, human nature, with its anxieties and hopes, still carries surprising and somewhat frightening echoes of those dark and fascinating times of the past. So, what did you think of these brutal and shocking rituals? Did you ever imagine that humanity, in its past, had such a visceral side, yet at the same time, so immersed in frightening beliefs? Tell us in the comments, which of these rituals shocked you the most? Or do you know of any other impressive stories involving ancient customs that you think should be revealed? We'd love to hear your thoughts and reactions. If this video captivated you from beginning to end and sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our content, and of course, turn on the notification bell. Because, believe me, we still have many, many shocking and fascinating secrets from antiquity to uncover and bring to you in future videos. See you then.